Sullivan's sister because I just didn't was looking for you in college. I didn't know you were moving. But certainly, it's certainly a time that, as I look through education, that Hooksett is certainly a very big part of what happens in Manchester. And I certainly applaud you for the hard work that you do here at Hooksett. As a senator, I had the opportunity to visit one of the schools. As a matter of fact, during the Flag Day last year, I dropped off flags at most of the schools here at Hooksett. There's no question that we have an awful label in the city of Manchester. Sometimes I refuse to use that label because we have great schools, we've got great teachers, and we've got great students. The teachers that are there today are as good as the teachers when I was going to school in Manchester school system. I matriculated through that school system, and I owe everything that I've gained in life from the education that I got in Manchester. As we move forward, I think opportunities are here that we need to sit down and at least have dialogue so that we can find out what the best thing is for the students in Hooksett for an education. And I think you folks do a great job here. But we must find a way that we can sit down and talk about what West High School has to offer and what can be done with it. Because I think you all know that the student count there is down low. We have a very difficult time in fielding sports teams. It's a difficult time for some of the music department and extracurricular activities. So I think that opportunities are here. I've looked at the contract, and I'm not saying that we're going to change the contract because we don't have that ability. But I think we have the ability to sit down and have conversations to see if we can find something from an educational point of view that would be both beneficial to Hooksett and to Manchester. I think it's important that we have those conversations. I'll be chairing the school board, as you know. I invite you in because I think you have seats on some of the different committees. I certainly invite you in to do that so that we can participate and move things forward and get your point of view across. I think it's important that we learn from our past mistakes. And what I mean by that, the past mistakes, when we had Bedford, we didn't have enough dialogue with them to see if we could make sure we did everything in our power to keep them in the city of Manchester and keep them at West High School. That mistake can't be again repeated with Hooksett. We must have a conversation. My feelings are that everything's on the table. If it means giving you a voting seat on the school board, something that I'm not opposed to, I think that's dialogue that we must have both as a community of Hooksett and the community of Manchester. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I know that there's probably a litany of questions, and as long as we don't let two former school board chairmen ask them, I'll be okay.
Talking single that. Yeah.
But I think what we'll do now is open it up to questions from the board first, and then see how that transpires, and then we'll have our opportunity for the public to address the board. So,
and certainly, I don't want to slight either Auburn or Candia because I think this dialogue is also a good part of them, so that they also have the ability to set in and voice their opinion. So I don't want anybody to think that.
It just so happens we do have the chairs of the Auburn and Candia School Board with us tonight. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Elaine Hobbs from Auburn.
Elaine, how are you?
I'm Karen Smith from Candia. Good to
Not
see
that
you.
I try to slight you, I just
I understand.
Come out and talk to your school boards if you'd like me to also.
Appreciate it.
All right, so anyway, we'll open it up to questions. I know many of you had sent me some ideas and questions, so perhaps, Todd, if you want to start, we can just work down. If anybody has any questions for the senator, I'd like to ask us.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
I am I'm interested in hearing a little bit more in terms of potential ideas that you might have. Obviously, if all of Hooksett students went to West, that would help fix the enrollment discrepancies, which is obviously important, to Manchester. I'm wondering what your understanding is beyond potentially a vote on the school board. What you think might be important to Hooksett, in terms of finding common ground that works for Manchester and for Hooksett. What is your understanding about what might be important to Hooksett?
I can't tell you what's important to folks, and I think it's you folks that may need to make that decision and give me a list and say, here are the things that are important to us. And if we're looking to weigh each side, these are some of the things that we'd like to gain. We'd sit down at the table and see, we would give you 5 of the 6 things that you're looking for, and maybe there would be 3 or 4 things on the city side that you could say, yeah, we could live with those too. So I think it's certainly a spot that we're opening the dialogue and having conversation about where we can go and what's the best thing that we can achieve. I know that might have, I can't tell you, here are my 5 things that I'd give for Hooksett. I think it'd be more appropriate for Hooksett to come back and say, here are the things we're looking for. If you're looking for X, Y, Z, we're willing to give you ABC. Can we all live with that and move along educationally? I think that's the important thing we have to start talking about. I'm not somebody that likes to set long timelines on things. I'm somebody that looks at things, tries to see 3 or 4 different solutions to the problem, and then get a group of people together that can say, here's the solution that we all can decide, maybe not unanimously, but best suits the situation that we're trying to move forward with. And I think that's important. I think it's got to be a win-win for everybody.
Having a seat on the Manchester School Board obviously gives the community of Hooksett some voice. If we were to pursue talks about having all of Hooksett students, for instance, attend West, my concern in that case would be that Hooksett would be one seat at the table around the Manchester School Board that controls all of education for all students in all schools, preschool through grade 12. So I'm wondering what your initial thoughts might be about having much greater control specifically over the school or schools that Hooksett students attend.
I think there are models across the country that show that. Maybe it's a separate SAU. We can have those discussions based on the number of students. Maybe there are so many people that sit at that board from the Manchester board if you put a separate board together. So I think those are all good questions. I think those are questions that we must bring forward and find out where the common ground is.
Mayor-elect Gatas, again, thanks for coming. Just a couple of things. Number one, how would you view the best way to improve communication? Like, just for instance, as a school board chair, back in August, people would call me like August 20th and say, are we going to do that pay-to-play thing, or what's going on? Unfortunately, my answer was, I don't know. And that was very difficult for me to have to convey to people that I really didn't know. Or, for instance, the additional 10 minutes at the end of the day, we didn't really know about that until late August again, right? So I'm just hoping, and I know we're off to a good start with communication, as I mentioned before, but I'm hoping that you have some good ideas that we can formulate a better communication between Manchester and Hooksett.
Well, I think what you will find about at least myself is that I'm very transparent. I believe in transparency. I believe that communication is very important. The more people you can keep involved in discussions, the better off you are. Because as soon as that breaks down, that causes problems for everyone. My goal this year is to work on a budget and bring it forward. A goal that we would work not only, and I think most of you may know how the process works in Manchester. The mayor brings out a budget at the end of March. The members of the automatic board then work on a budget from March to June, and then we have a final vote. I'm planning on, I've started already working on the budget, working on the CIP budget. I plan on having aldermen sit down and participate in the budget process so that it's not a mayor's budget, but a city's budget. And it comes forward in March. We would vote on it on the first week in April, so there would be no rifting, and you would just know much sooner what's happening in that process. The school board budget would be presented sometime in February. I've already started working on that budget with Dr. Brennan and having conversations so that we can have something long before the end of June. Because what happens is we start in January, end in June, we talk for 6 months about a budget, and we never have discussions about anything else, whether it's educationally or at the city level. I'm looking to change that dialogue so that we can participate in a much more streamlined budget process and a much more open one.
Well, we'll look forward to that, thank you. And my second question is, getting back to West High, I was just wondering, some time ago, there was talk of the academies, and I was wondering if you and the Manchester School Board would consider revisiting that idea of the academies at West.
I think that right now everything is on the table. I think that those discussions must start because West High School is at the crossroads. We must find a way to educate children in the city of Manchester in a much different fashion than we're doing now. And I'm committed to do that. Certainly putting an effort in and putting in an awful lot of time. I went to a mayor's convention down at Harvard. It was at the Harvard Business School. And certainly got an awful lot of ideas of what's happening across the country. So there are opportunities that we can take a look at, we can participate in, and certainly have that dialogue. But as I said, my timelines that I set are not something that we talk about for the next 3 years and then maybe it comes about the fourth year. I think those timelines have to happen sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. Todd, you have any hand?
Yeah, thank you for coming. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Just to piggyback off what Paul said with the academies, there's a unique opportunity for funding right now with the Race to the Top program. Would you see a collaborative between Hooksett, Manchester with the West High School, an opportunity to get funding through that program? My concern is that if Dr. Brennan or your school district has till I believe January 11th to declare whether they're going to go for that grant or not. There was some current literature where Dr. Brennan was hesitant to go for it because he would have to replace some staff.
Well, I can certainly speak on that because I participated very actively in the last 4 or 5 days. There was a meeting that we had in the school district on Thursday, which I was asked to go to. Certainly they had the teachers union there and they had the 5 principals that were going to be participating out of the 5 schools for this Race to the Top. Some of the things that I heard, and knowing the background of some of these schools, Beach Street School is a very different type of community. Probably 82% of the children there are on free and reduced lunch. Probably 70 or 80% are English language, second language speakers. So it's a different type of elementary school. They had 600 students enrolled there in September. They have 600 students in November, but 180 different students in that school. You could take the best principal in the world and put them in that atmosphere, and it's going to be very difficult to change it. So the Race to the Top, certainly after I've done my due diligence and looked at it, when you start talking about replacing 5 teachers, the academy program is not part of the Race to the Top. There are 5 schools that they're talked about in Manchester that would be participating. You must remove the principal and 50% of the teachers. There's no question that there's always a desire to find as much federal dollars as you can find. But when you start having those strings attached and you have the 5 schools that probably may not be as diverse as Beach Street, but you've got Bakersville, you've got Parker Varney, and you also have Gossip. And you've got those 4 schools that when you start looking at it, the diversity is not exactly the same as Beach Street, but it's pretty close. So I don't know when you start talking about eliminating principals, because every school, and I'm sure it is the same way in Hooksett, is its own little family. And if you said to somebody here that you were going to move 50% of the teachers from here over to Macaulay, you probably would have a major problem. And I think that right now, the last thing we can afford in the city of Manchester is bad morale. We've got teachers that are working very hard. There are schools that are working very hard to get out of that label that has fallen upon them. And I think that the Race to the Top money, they've got 50% of the money that comes in. There's roughly, if you're looking at Manchester's levels, and I'm not too sure that, as close as I could see it, there are 3 levels that have opportunities. One is about a grant coming to the city of about $1.7 million. Another one is about 6.5 million. There's another one that's higher than that at 75. If 75 million comes to the state, we would be looking at 10 million. If you just take the one that's in the middle at 6.5 million and you divide that by 5 schools over a 4-year period, it's about $300,000 to a school. There's not much you can effectively do with $300,000 in a school to change education the way it should be changed. So when you start looking at these dollars, it's time that we start looking and understanding what the strings are that are attached to them. And I'm not too sure, the one waiver that has been submitted that came out of Washington is that you wouldn't have to remove 50% of the teachers. We're looking for a waiver that says either we bring somebody in or some other company that can work with our principals so that they're still intact and come forward with some different ideas. We have some students right now that are at Hillside, city year students, that do a great job at Hillside. There's 7 of them there that occupy about 50 kids and take them from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 in the afternoon and follow through with it very well. My question yesterday, it's funny you should ask, we sat down, we had about a 3-hour discussion about how do we get more kids involved in this system and get them involved at grades 1, 2, and 3 so that we can get them in these schools where they're seeing these younger kids and getting them before they get into the problem areas. Because if you can get them sooner, you're not trying to cure a problem when they're in the 7th and 8th grade. So those are things that we're looking at. So Race to the Top is something that we have to at least identify by Friday that we're willing to participate. By January 11th, I must sign off as one of the signees on that money. So I think what we're going to do is probably go forward, and because there are other school districts in the state that would apply for the money and participate. So I think we're probably going to move forward to see if we can continue talking about waivers that may be happening from Washington. January 11th is another very hard date, and that'll be a date that, as I look at it, we need to find out if it's the best thing for the city of Manchester.
Thank you. Thank you again. I think your approach to accelerate the budget process in Manchester certainly would help us from not having to worry about the uncertainty of what the budget's going to be right before the end of the school year. So that certainly will help us to understand where you will be in meeting the goals of the contract, which is the key is being an approved school. And I believe Manchester Central has finally been approved by the state based on the discrepancies that they had being not approved all these many years. Of course, one of the concerns about approval is that you need funds. And last year, the school budget was 154 million requested, and the final budget was about 146, which you were instrumental in putting together. Now that's still an $8 million difference. Not to say how you need to direct how you approach your budget and where you get the financing is, but my understanding is some of the money that revenue you're using is coming from federal grants, and that federal grant money is not going to last forever. I don't know if within the 2 years. So and I think we use the word funding cliff, and so after 2 years, that's going to have a big impact on you because you're concerned about increasing taxes and meeting that. So how is that approach going to help meet our concerns about you need money to fund teachers, because if you have less teachers, the impact on class sizes goes up, and that's specifically mentioned in the contract. So
Sure,
I don't know if you can comment on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me just tell you that as being the chairman of the school board, I also have asked the board and had discussion. We have rules that we abide by. I'm sure it's the same change here. We have, I think, 5 or 6 standing committees. There's a committee in finance. I've changed that so that committee is a committee of the whole. Got the unanimous approval of all 14 members, so that we're going to sit down as a committee of the whole and have discussions about the budget. I'll be chairing that committee. So the questions that I've tried to ask for the last 10 years, and sometimes we're not able to get. I can tell you now that being the chairman, I will get those answers. And we will make sure that the discussions are very pertinent to the things that we're looking for on a budget. And I think there are different things we must look at to see if we can streamline budgeting, to see if we can find different ways for efficiencies in the system. And certainly classroom sizes are important, there's no question. Redistricting is something that at the, you've probably heard me, or if you've been reading the paper, you've probably been hearing me talking about redistricting. And I think that's a very important issue between grades K through 8. I think that that's really where we have to start. It hasn't been done in an awful long time. We bus students that live less than a quarter of a mile from Smith Road School, we bus them to Weston. I don't have to tell you that each bus that you take costs about $50,000. So there are things that as you go through the budget process, and again, because I'm looking at a very short timeline, that we're going to get answers and we're going to find ways to do different things. It's important that we understand that once we start talking as a group, that we have everything on the table, because you may have some ideas that you can bring forward to us that might be beneficial to our elementary schools that you may be doing here, that may be cost effective, that we may not have explored. So I think that we must have the dialogue, we must keep it open. This shouldn't happen just once a year or on times that somebody is newly elected and decides they want to come and see somebody. Because I've always believed that as a senator I was there and I was available to talk to anybody that wanted to talk to me. And certainly we could get things done. So I'm here to start the discussions. I hope that we can move this forward in a very timely manner so that I can go back, and certainly if the two boards, I have no problem that even if we bring Auburn and Candia in and have 3 boards meet, along with the Manchester School Board, and if we need to put it in a bigger place so that we can all have that communication, so that, as I've tried to do, and I'll supply the pizza, because I think that people eat together, they stay together. And I've tried to do that at the city side, and try to take down the wall that says, it's important that we have communication between the school board and the aldermanic. And it seems to be working. And certainly, I look forward to that happening here also.
You did you mentioned redistricting in your comments. One of the comments that you made in the union leader was something regarding 9th grade. So clearly, you know that you have a contract, the city has a contract with Hooksett 9 through 12. So redistricting and sending those students to McLaughlin or Parkside or so forth clearly would have an impact on the contract, because you still responsibility. So I don't know how.
I can appreciate that.
You may have rethought that.
No, I haven't rethought it. And certainly I rethought it only for the point that I put it out there. And I can't believe how much dialogue is starting to happen about education. So that's a good thing.
Okay.
So if something's out there that's creating discussion, that's a good thing. Now, I can't tell you that that was my number one goal. It might have been a subject matter that might have been out there so that people started talking. That was important. The number one goal that I'm looking at is K through 6. And if you gave me the magic wand, what's happening across the country is schools are going back K through 8. They've totally eliminated the junior high school. Now, if you gave me the wand and said, go ahead, you build it, I would definitely go back to a K through 8 system. Because all of a sudden you've got 50 kids that are 7th and 8th graders in one school. Instead of throwing 700 of them in one school, it makes a big difference. So I'm a believer in baby steps, and if I can get K through 6, maybe we will have dialogue for 7 and 8. Obviously 9 is the one that created the fury everywhere, and that's a good thing. That's good. The conversation has gotten to a height that it's never been before.
And initially you mentioned West as a possibility of which you certainly would need to negotiate, moving all students from Hooksett over the West. Now, that certainly won't be, that's easier said than done, because along with the many generations of Hooksett students, families have been bleeding green all these years. So moving that over would be easily done. that may be a solution that would mutually benefit Hooksett, with certainly getting more say in how things are done at the high school, as Mrs. Burke said. But if that, for some reason, is not a solution, there still would be the discrepancy between the sizes. The West situation, which has lower numbers, which is almost about 1,000 difference, correct? So that has an impact on being able to offer the number of courses at West and so forth. The difficulty for you would be the redistricting of the high schools. If that would not be the solution.
I would never look to redistrict high schools.
Okay, because that would be if you cannot move Hooksett over, which has about 800 students, that certainly would be a good step in solving the classroom sizes and so forth. But if that's not possible, what would happen at that point if we can't get Hooksett to go over to West?
Well, I certainly would love to sit here and say to you, here are my 3 plans that I have on the table. But until I'm sworn into office January 5th and have an opportunity to sit down with my board and talk to them about it, I can tell you that I have 3 different plans to look at, to what we can have conversations with about Hooksett, and how we're going to get to some realization of whether it's something that is the right thing for Hooksett, not the right thing for Hooksett, and a combination of all the districts that are playing in this, so that we're all on the same table. I think it's important we have the dialogue. It's got to happen long before June. We've got to come to a conclusion by April or May, because there are other options that certainly would be out there for us to look at for West. Certainly, if it doesn't happen, that's fine. Maybe there's something else that we can do that everybody can join in and say, yeah, this is a solution and we'll move forward with it. Maybe we can even convince Auburn and Candia to come to West with us. That would be a great thing. But again, there are 3 things that I'm looking at to see how do we change the complexion. Look, should we have an advanced class at West with 4 kids and have an advanced class at Memorial with 3 kids and another advanced class with 7 kids at Central? I think there's something that we need to change, because those advanced students learn on their own. They do a great job of searching out and finding things on their own. So maybe we find a way to get them in one building or in one place so that they can feed off of each other. Instead of having 4 teachers do the same thing, we can get 1 teacher to teach 20 kids, and it moves forward, and we can distribute those teachers in other places. So there are an awful lot of things that we must talk about on how we formulate education to move it forward. We must find ways to get kids graduating sooner. Right now in Manchester, we have about 180 kids that are going to be in their 5th year of high school. That's $9,000 a child. I don't have to tell you that if it's 180 this year, it's going to progress to a larger number going down, because we've increased the number of credits. And we have only 2 children that will be graduating by grade 11. We must find ways to get these educated kids out sooner, give them an opportunity to move forward, and find out ways that we can do things in a different manner.
I just have one more question. As you were aware that we had a public listening session where we had about over 300 parents attend. And I believe we sent their comments to you within the package of our initial letter. And I think one of the concerns mentioned, well, I'll let you comment on that, but the key within that, I think there was about 10 constant comments, or consistent content, was improving communications. As Mr. Chairman said, the lack of communications that we perceived was there, which I think it was. Do you have any thoughts on the comments that we sent to you that were gauged from the public?
Well, I think it's important that I'm going to do everything in my power to keep the Sentinel schools continuing to participate in Manchester. I think it's a great thing for the students in Manchester to have that diversity. I think that it helps them, and it helps the students that are coming. So certainly, as I said, I believe in transparency. My door is always open. I return all phone calls. If you ask me a question, if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know, and I will get you the answer. But usually when I ask the question, I already know the answer, so I expect that from people as they deal with me going forward.
Thank you. You all set? Anyone else from the board? Dana?
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm Dana Argo,
Nice to meet you.
and like you, I have a long history with the Manchester school system. I was born and raised there. And, you know, my dad was a member of award-winning bands and orchestras back in the 30s, and when my sister and I went there, they were, that was at Manchester Central, and when I went, my sister and I went there were award-winning newspapers and yearbooks, and now we're talking about compliance. And I'm going to ask you 3 questions because I think they're all,
I think I have
they're all
them in front of
related. Yes.
I sent those to you.
The first being, very simply, are the schools compliant, in your opinion, and based on the guidelines? And then from there, assuming they are, or when they are, do you think we should be striving for minimum standards? You know, the state sets forth guidelines for us, and I consider those minimum standards. And do you think we should be striving for better than that? And assuming you say yes, how are we going to do that with a tax cap? And I would hope, as part of that third question, maybe you could give us a high-level explanation of how that tax cap is. I know taxes can still go up with a tax cap, but if you could give us a high-level explanation of how that's going to work.
Sure, tax cap is a little bit like your default budget. Similar. I think you folks on the education side fell into a default budget this year.
No, they've been there. They've been here for
It's been
a while. Yeah.
So, I mean, that it's a guideline. I think it's something that is put out there and people, you know, want to believe in the boogeyman, and I don't believe in them. I believe that you run a company in a school district in a city the best you can. And as long as the people in Manchester and the surrounding towns understand that what you're doing with their money, that you're doing as much as you can in a fiduciary way to make sure that you get services and education done correctly. I don't think that you hear a complaint or a problem. It's when they start seeing money being squandered is when you start hearing the taxpayers really having a problem. There's no question that everybody today sits down at a kitchen table and works on a budget in a much different manner than they probably did 2 or 3 years ago. And I think that that's the way we must approach government. We must find ways that it's more efficient and get things done in a much different way. We can't take 5 or 6 months to complete ideas and bring them forward. Developers can't wait 8 months to get an answer on a building permit. Things have to change, not only education, but also through services in the city. So the tax cap is a guide. We don't have the ability to bring forward a budget and have the voters of the community vote it up or down, and then have a default budget fall on top of it. We must do what we must do and do it the best way. Certainly if there's a problem, as I've always said, that the economic engine in the state of New Hampshire is the airport. It produces $1.2 billion of revenue for the state of New Hampshire. If the tax cap put the airport in jeopardy, I would ask my colleagues on that board to vote against the cap and to do what we had to do to keep the engine moving. And I think that's like any other project. If we had a school that had a major problem and we needed a major renovations to get kids back in school, I would lead the charge to take care of the tax cap so that we can get things done. So the tax cap is a guide, and it only tells you that here it is. I think that certainly if we looked at a deflationary economy and all of a sudden deflation was here and it was down 4%, I don't think anybody could expect us to reduce expenses by 4% and work on a negative basis. So I think it's important that we have it. The voters voted it in. They were very clear that they wanted it there. And I think we must look at it, and it's certainly a guideline for us to follow. Last year, we were under that tax cap, if there was a tax cap in place. So I think that people are very cognizant of spending nowadays, whether you're the Hooksett School District or the Manchester School District or the Mirror and all of them. I think that people are aware of it, and I think that people are paying attention to it.
So you don't see the cap as tying your hands?
No, I think that if you're doing what you believe is right for the city and the state, then you're not going to have that problem. I think it's a guide. As I said, it's no different from a default budget. I mean, that puts you into it. If that doesn't tie your hands, I don't know what does.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you you talked about the tax ad, but one question about, he asked you, do you believe, I mentioned approval, do you believe the district is, the high schools are compliant?
I'm not going to give you an answer to a question that, when you ask me about compliance, does that mean educationally? Does that mean facility-wise? What is the compliance you're asking me about?
State guidelines.
When you say state guidelines, those are pretty rampant.
Well, I guess, are you aware of any
I'm not aware of
areas where
My
they're
answer to
not
you is,
meeting state
as
guidelines?
of today, I'm not aware of anything that we're not meeting state guidelines. Unless you have a specific that you know that I don't know.
No, it's one of those items, depending on who you're listening to. There are some people that say that, there were compliance issues. And then there were some that say, that I understand it was with guidance counselors and maybe Southside and one of the high schools, maybe Memorial. Once those were hired, they became compliant. But then other people are saying, well, there's more to it. So
Well, I think that those, at the state level, they've gone up and addressed those with the DOE. I think that the DOE is giving the city of Manchester on the compliance issues that are before them and cleaning them out.
I appreciate your vigor with cutting through the bureaucracy and trying to get to the table to discuss things and make some changes. What form do you envision, or do you suggest, to get all three boards together? Especially, I guess, concern is the contractual issues. Would it be a public forum?
I never do anything behind closed doors without the public seeing it. So it would be a public forum, wherever we could find the capacity to hold all four boards together. I don't think that should be difficult. I think there's enough forums that we can do it. I would hope that, I'm sure that, there are nights of the week that may not be perfect for everybody, but certainly as many people we can get to the table to have those discussions are important. You folks meet on Wednesdays. I don't know when the Auburn and Candia school districts meet. The one in Manchester, we are going to start meeting twice a month instead of once a month. That's another rule change I'll be bringing forward, that we'll have 2 meetings a month. So I'm taking this as a very serious challenge when it comes to education. Because I think there are an awful lot of opportunities that are out there that we can find.
Anyone else from the board? Dr. Luke?
Yeah, I just, maybe a couple of things.
Sure. I'm surprised it took you this long.
My mother would be so proud of me.
Be careful, my mother's outside in the next room.
He knows best to yield to the school board members first.
And I do have to say, this is hopefully the beginning of a new chapter in this relationship. I do know you, not as a mayor, but as a senator. And I know that the first time I ever met you, you took out your cell phone. You said, if you ever need me, here's my cell phone number, and I'll pick it up if you call me. So I will confess that I'm the one that gave your cell phone number.
Sorry, Dave, for you.
I can tell you that my cards have my cell phone number up that I pass out. As mayor, they will be there, and I answer all the calls.
Well, that's made a lasting impression on me. And also, from what I understand, the relationship that exists between Hooksett and Manchester is like 175 years old or something. I don't want to be the superintendent that dismantles that relationship. But I need to be honest, the relationship is in jeopardy. And it's not the board, it's not me, it's the feeling tones that I'm getting from the community, and some anxiety over some things. And I'm hoping that one of the things that we'll be able to accomplish tonight is not fire a whole bunch of questions that there aren't answers to, but really to pique your awareness maybe of some things that are issues to the parent public, and things that I hear every day. With shared governance, might really be a model of that. And I'm talking about an equal voice with Manchester. But what we're going to have to address that you may or may not be aware of, and I wouldn't be aware of it if my phone didn't ring and parents call.
Do you want to come shopping with me on Sundays at the grocery store?
Well, you know what's interesting? When I was an urban superintendent, for 15 of the 20 years that I was an urban superintendent, I lived in the city. For the last 5, I didn't. And I didn't know that that I could go to the grocery store and not get in. I know exactly what you're talking about. School approval, that a couple of people have, when Daniel was talking about standards, he was talking about school approval. And for every year of our agreement, Manchester has been out of compliance and failed to achieve, at the high school level, school approval for the 3 high schools. On August 31st, the approval was granted by the Department of Education based upon what was in place at the time. And I would suggest to you that there may have been things that occurred after school opened, that if we were going through the school approval process today, we would fail to meet school approval once again. That would be issues surrounding class size, the number of kids in laboratory classrooms, so the school approval process is something that we really need to look at. And as a community, we're going to have to assure our parents that that is in place. Accreditation by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges of the 3 high schools is an issue that together hopefully we'll be able to address. 2 of the 3 schools are on probation, and probation is not, I think, what we entered into a contract on. The contract talks about accreditation. Warning or probation is not full accreditation. That's an issue that we're going to have to address together. Class size, as I mentioned, I hear over and over again. When school opened, I had parents calling me about 40s. I think since that time, it's been reduced. But there are a number of instances where class size is over 30. That is inconsistent with school approval, and something together I hope that we're going to be able to address. At that school forum that we talked about, one of the parents, I had been getting complaints about lack of textbooks. And one of the parents at that school forum brought a textbook that her kid had been issued and said, my kid got this textbook in school today and was told to bring it home and cover it. And she held the book up, and the book had no cover. So the binding was missing from the cover. And I don't bring those things up to be a jerk about it. I bring them up because parents call me, and I know parents contact the board and say, what are you going to do about it? The solution is for us to build a high school. I'm not sure that that's the solution. I think we can achieve excellence in another way. And, you know, Senator, the last thing on earth I'm going to do is stick my nose into your budget process, because the truth is I have enough trouble putting together 3 budgets in SAU 15 and understanding how they work and administering those budgets. Your budget is none of my business. However, the services that we're contracting for is where I'd like to focus as this hopefully new and expanded relationship unfolds. Not so much that we're going to have opinions on when you should budget, how you should budget. Frankly, I don't care, nor do I understand it. But those basic services, accreditation, school approval, class size, textbooks, supplies, parents were calling me telling me their kids were standing in classrooms or sitting on the floor. And those are all issues that have absolutely got to be a single blip on our radar screen that happened this year but can never, ever, ever happen again. Because our problem here in Hooksett and in Auburn and Candia is those things have happened for 2 years in a row. And I can't speak for the board, but I can speak as the educational leader for these 3 communities. My credibility is a little diminished. When parents call me with some of these issues and I tell them we'll address them or because they don't get addressed. I'm really very taken and impressed by your initial willingness to talk about things like governance. You know, I don't know how the Hooksett community or the Auburn and the Canandaigua community would respond to a West relationship, but you know what? I would say this, that if we can pull off that relationship and shared governance, and the 3 sending districts have an equal voice in how that school runs, an equal administrative voice, we will deliver the best high school in New Hampshire.
Well, I'm glad you finished with that conclusion, because I'm the person that always loves to look forward and not look back, because I can't fix what was behind me. I played an awful lot of sports, and I could have won an awful lot of games on Mondays if I had an opportunity to go back and play what I did on Sunday.
All of us.
I'm a native of Manchester. I grew up there. I love that community. As I said to you, the education I got there is why I'm here today, not for any other reason. And I think it's important that we have conversation, that when we talk about governance, as I said, you know, I work on my staff is here and they will tell you, I work on some pretty tough timelines. I don't have a problem putting in 17, 18-hour days to get things accomplished, because if I believe something strongly, I will voice my opinion. You'll hear what my views are. I will tell you why I came up with those views and the facts that are behind them. And I think that we must start, and we must start January 5th, looking to sit down, and certainly I would ask the superintendent, along with yourself, to see what is a day that we can get together. If it's a Saturday, I have no problem. I went to the Department of Education on Sunday and spent 3 hours because I wanted to learn about Race to the Top. So I believe education is important to every child, not only in the city of Manchester, not only in Hooksett and Auburn and Candia, but in the state of New Hampshire. And we must deliver a product that is going to be far superior than what we've ever seen before. We've got challenges, but we have opportunities. And I like our opportunities better than challenges.
From a logistics point of view, and by the way, your superintendent is one of the most communicative people that I've ever worked with. It is a pleasure to work with Tom. From a logistic point of view, you and I may share a lot of things in common. Patience is not one of my virtues. So I'd call Tom tomorrow and start setting this up, but I guess I have to wait until January 5th.
I would suggest and ask you that you would wait and do that.
Yeah. I was afraid you'd say that.
You might have communication with them. I can only tell you because of where we are between the 2 boards.
Yeah.
And having some of the problems that we have in the city of Manchester, getting the 2 boards together the last time, because there are some people, there are more than 5 aldermen that may be on a committee that, you know, creates a problem with the right to know. And this was, and the newspaper was there, and we weren't looking to do anything other than saying, come on in, let's have a piece of pizza and communicate with each other so that we all know who we are, because sometimes there are board members that don't know the others. So I would ask you that certainly it's important, as I've said to both the school board and to the aldermen in the city, that there is a table open and seats open for them to participate in both budgets on both sides. The transparency should be there so that the school board members can come in and see what's happening on the school side, on the city side, and the city aldermen should be there to be able to see what's happening on the school board side when they perform the budget. I certainly would open that up and invite anybody to the table when we start creating budgets, because I think it's important, as you said, you know, it's not something you're looking to stick your nose in. And certainly, I always look at any opportunity and any piece of information that comes forward that we can do something differently, that makes it more effective and more efficient. That's not a bad thing. Ideas are not bad. That's part of what education is all about. And certainly, I ask you folks to start. I'm going to, as I said, when I put together the timeline, you may find that I'm a little bit more impatient than you are, so that'll be good. We'll get something done.
So, Senator, would you suggest, and I want to pin us all down to logistically what's going to happen, that Tom and I would speak, and then Tom will coordinate with you and the Board of School Committee, and I will coordinate with the 3 school boards on my end. Is that how you see it? So that we'll try and get something off the ground.
As a joint meeting, the first one, yeah. And I think that it would be important that maybe you set up a meeting with 3 school boards that you have here, Hooksett Community and Auburn, put together some definite ideas or ideas that you'd like to see us go into. If you had that perfect wish list that you could, seeing we're close to Christmas, that you could put together and say, here are the things that we would like. And then we can sit down and maybe start those discussions right after the fact.
Thank you.
And certainly, I'd open up to any questions out there if you don't mind. If somebody, it'd be difficult for me to believe that Mrs. McHugh would be. Especially with
Good to be singled out.
Isn't that strange, Senator Gatas, that you think that I would have a question? Indeed, I do. I wanted to speak a little bit about the academies, okay, at West High School. I participated in the committee that worked on it, and they worked on it for 2 years, and there was a lot of hard work. And I was very, very sad when not only was it presented to the Board of School Committee, but the lack of respect that they paid not only to their own staff, but to the people from the sending communities that participated on that study. But it was also what they did with the study. They threw it in some bottom file cabinet
It's out. It's out.
and left it there.
It's already
And
out.
I guess in listening to the conversation this evening, there's been a lot of discussion about looking into things that are out of the norm and trying to do what's in the best interest of students. And I think if you look at the students that go to school today are certainly much different than when you went to school and when I went to school and when some of my children went to school. My last one passed through Central 3 years ago, and Central is even different now than it was then. And I think as far as the academies, and I just think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm a great believer that when you're forced sometimes into a situation that you may consider a negative, that it's not a negative. It forced you to turn the corner to look at things in a different way. And I think with Bedford's leaving, I think it should have been no surprise to the city of Manchester. They knew it all along in the discussions with the negotiations that things were not going well, that some of the things that Bedford was looking for that Manchester was unwilling to give. And in fact, they probably were the impetus for Bedford getting their high school. But that's another story and we won't go there.
Might have been a snowstorm that day when they voted.
Well, anyhow, I guess what I'm saying is, as far as I'm concerned, I think that the academies can be an opportunity for education to be at its best. Okay, you have many students today, whether or not some of their abilities lie in music, in theater, in math or whatever, that a lot of times you find parents that are supporting these gifts that their children have, and they send them to special camps, they have them take music lessons and whatnot. Why not capitalize on that and make it a school of that? And I'll tell you something, the whole idea of what Manchester is going to be, the Queen City, will certainly change. Because, you know, you talk about wanting to do things for those students that are interested, those students who want to get out of school. That's what those students that are looking at those academies, they want to get out of school. They're so anxious to get on with their lives and to move on to higher education and to see themselves in those careers. So I think it's an opportunity. It's not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing if people take advantage of it and do it in a way that benefits the students. And I think that's the biggest thing. Do what's in the best interest of the students. And you talk, I know you call it Macaulay, it's Cawley School. It's Dave Cawley. And for all the years that I was on the school board, Dave Cawley always said to me, Joanne, when you make a decision, your decision should be based on what is good for the children, what is in their best interest. I think this is one of them.
Thank you for the question.
I wondered whether or not what you thought about that. I just think that you ought to look into it.
John?
Yes, my name's John Peroni, and I'm a former school board member. I was on the board when we voted for the contract, and I've had 3 children go through Central High School, so and I still wear a little green football hat. But my question is I'm concerned with the funding level, and particularly with the cliff coming forward. And so my question to you would be is, if you came to the conclusion as the chairman of the school board that the funding level in Manchester isn't sufficient to meet the educational needs of the students that go to particularly to the high schools, that's what we're talking about here, would you be willing to see an increase in that budget and an increase in the tax rate, if that's what resulted, in order to provide a quality education?
If we looked at every other item and found every efficiency that we could find, and there was nothing else left on the table, I don't have a problem with that. But we've got to all be cognizant of the facts that are around us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm also chairman of the budget committee, so I'm
Make sure you take good care of this school district. And how many times has your budget passed every time you presented it? Or what was the position of your budget last year?
It passed.
It passed.
Passed.
Right.
It passed. It's passed last.
Was it more than the year before or less?
More.
It was more.
By how much?
$1 million.
And that accounts for about the $400,000 you're going to lose in the revenue sharing that comes back to the community. Because that's a shortfall that's coming back to Hooksett. Our shortfall was about $6 million in the revenue sharing side.
John, you all set?
Yes, thank you.
Linda?
Linda Johnson. I have 2 students who go to West, or one graduated. I bleed blue. The rest of the town bleeds green. My frustration, and I experienced the Bedford transition. My frustration comes in when things like grading systems change mid-term. We just read in the Union Leader that extracurriculars were coming back that weren't supposed to come back because of budgets. So that means less money for textbooks because the $80,000 has to come from someplace. It seems kind of wishy-washy, to be quite honest. And that's my frustration with the Manchester School District.
I share your frustration. Hopefully that's going to change.
At the public listening session that we had for the Hooksett community a few weeks ago, there were some wonderful comments, a lot of great input. I think everyone on the board and the administration was very impressed, not only with the number of comments, but the thoughtfulness of the comments. When I had asked you the question earlier about what might be important to Hooksett, you said, well, that's really your job to tell me. So if you basically take those comments that we heard on that evening and you lump them together into themes, there were really 6 themes that came out from that evening. One was communication, which we touched on before. One is that I think many people in Hooksett really appreciate the diversity that Hooksett students experience when they go to Manchester. They're experiencing different cultures, different communities, different socioeconomic families. They appreciate the wide course selection. Control, voice, influence is hugely important. A quality education, which includes things like textbooks, technology, 21st century skills, good teachers. And the 6th one is really planning, or frustration with lack thereof in the Manchester School District. So, just in terms of broad themes, I just share that with you because that's what we've been hearing, and I think the specifics obviously need to be hammered out as we go forward. But I think the Hooksett School Board is going to be very, very attuned to these themes and how well we can meet them with whatever we do with Manchester going forward.
And I think those themes are very similar to the themes that, as I choose different grocery stores on Sunday to buy groceries. But it doesn't, I can tell you it's funny because I was at that mayor's convention. One of the comments was, you need to change grocery stores from grocery shops so that people would see it. And I said, geez, I was changing it just so that maybe they wouldn't recognize me in the neighborhood that I had gotten elected in. And I might get through there in an hour and a half instead of 3 hours. But I think those themes are very similar to what's in Manchester. I don't think that anything that you're saying here wouldn't be said by a big percentage of the parents in Manchester. I was at Central High School the other day. I spent 4 hours there. I was going through some of the classrooms and talking with the children to see what ideas they had. What do you think would make the school different? Are some of you in favor of starting at 6 and getting out at noon? How many would you like to start at 9 and get out at 3? So I think those are things that when you start talking to children and they start seeing the face, they start participating. But I can tell you, as I walked into one of the classrooms, there were 3 children that had just come in that morning from Nepal. And they're in the system. Manchester has something that most other communities don't have. We've got 72 different languages at Central High School. That's great diversity. It's a great place to go to school. It's a great thing to learn from people in other countries, and when you give them an opportunity, they get up to speed pretty quickly. But it's unfair that when that child comes in, and 2 weeks later we have a test, and we tell them to take that test, and that test score is counted in that total. That's unfair, and that's something that we must stop. If people want us to participate at the federal level on federal funds, that's someplace that we need a waiver. And that's something that communities like Hooksett, Auburn, and Candia must start supporting Manchester with a very loud voice. Because that just puts that label in a position that it shouldn't be. Because there are still great students that are leaving the Manchester school system and going on to Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And they're going out and they're going to secondary colleges, which are good. I think those are discussions we must have. We must find common ground that we can all agree to. And again, when that voice is loud enough, it makes a very loud echo. And those are things, as we look at education, I've already talked to the superintendent, that I want those test scores removed, and let's take a look and see where we fall. Because that's just from a PR perspective at the local communities, and see what it looks like. Because when you have people that are meeting their yearly progress at Beach Street School, except for 2 cells and a couple of those, that's pretty impressive. Because I would challenge most people to go down and spend a few hours at Beach Street School and say, wow, they've really gone a long way. And we should be able to accomplish that same thing in all the schools in the city of Manchester, including West and Central. There's no question about that. So I'm opening the door. I hope you folks follow me through, because I'd like to have the conversation continue to make sure we find whether it's an academy or something else that's going to work for the students, not only this district, but also the other sending communities.
Anyone else from the public?
Just one thing, the dialogue here tonight has been great, and I thank you very much for coming in. I think there is an immediate need, and Dr. Littlefield had talked a little bit about it tonight, and I'm just hoping that that's one of the things you look at right away. I don't think we can wait 6 months or 8 months for some of the things that the community is talking about as far as class size and things. And I just wondered if the proposal that we had read about in the paper is something that is it something you're seriously considering as far as changing the configuration of high school to 3 grades?
No, I don't. I think I might have answered that more.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
I think that was something that I threw out in the air to start conversation, and it certainly has gotten everybody's attention.
It certainly did.
Which is a good thing. That's a good thing. Everybody's talking to me. Now maybe I'll get my K through 6 and they'll say we'll give you half of it.
All right, I just wanted to be sure that was clarified. Thank you.
Elaine?
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you, Mayor-elect, for coming, and I do appreciate the open lines of communication. That is something that I've always been open to and look forward to any official that is elected that's out there. And I just wanted to, from Auburn perspective, I mean, I've always been a huge proponent of Manchester, and, our kids primarily go to Memorial. I have a freshman in college and a junior there currently. Both did very well, been very pleased. The diversity, I think it's a great opportunity. But with Auburn, because, we have quite a few people that are Pinkerton graduates, they have taken some of our students, and when we found at first, it has been just a handful. You have 5 or 6 kids that apply and get accepted and end up going over, or if they get accepted, and going over to Pinkerton. Last year, that was about half of the 8th grade class applied, and part of that, I would have to say part, if not most, of the reason for that was because of the budget concerns that people have over in Manchester. This year we're looking at not quite half, but still maybe a third. It's still a significant number, the students going over there, and that's a big concern of mine, because it divides our community unbelievable. And you get, we get accepted to Pinkerton, we're going over here and it's better, and it's not, and they've got this and they're not going to have any sports, and it's not good. So I really, really hope that we can fix this issue with communication and really give our kids a really strong education, because I think it's so important. And I don't think a Pinkerton solution is something that's going to be in our future, or that is even something that is good for everybody within the community. So I really hope that that we can really work through this. And
well, it's important that we get those students back from Auburn that are going to Pinkerton.
Right. I mean, we've got.
That there's been discussion about a contract, and I think in that contract it says all students except for exceptions that would file would all be coming to Manchester. So I'll leave that on the table and just say we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that they come back to Manchester.
Because you figure if we've got 100 students over there at approximately $8,000 a piece, if not more, that's a significant amount of money that could be going into Manchester.
Absolutely.
So, just a concern.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you, and certainly
Thank you very much.
I will appreciate getting back to you folks and setting up a pretty rigorous schedule that we will meet and at least have discussions and find some common ground that we can all agree with. But thank you for having me.